Hey, good morning. Today we're going to talk about how to set up a Polhemus Fastrack position and orientation tracker. It's this one's set up actually with 4 receivers and 1 transmitter, and we'll walk through how to set it up and run some basic tests and make sure everything is a-okay. So, front of the unit we have 4 receivers. This is what a receiver looks like here, and it plugs in on the front panel. I'm going to unplug it just to show you, but here with a connector like that, so you can plug it back in. There are a set of dip switches right here. For each receiver that you plug in, you need to throw the corresponding dip switch down. So, and the order is starting at the bottom left, 1, 2, down at the bottom right, 3, and 4. So in this case, I have all 4 receivers plugged in, all 4 dip switches are down. If I were to unplug number 4, which is this top right one, then I'd pull switch 4 up. The other thing we have is a transmitter. This is our reference point and how the magnetic system works to send signals to the receivers. It's on a fairly long cable which goes right here and plugs in a similar plug right here. That's pretty simple. Really, we have a power connector, goes in here, goes to a power supply, universal voltage. You have to have the right power cord to go to your wall socket. It's a standard IEC cord. The other thing we have is a simple null modems 9-pin serial cable, that is transmit and receiver cross. That's the definition of null modem, and that runs right up to COM1 on the back of our computer. And really, any computer that has a COM port is fine. The default on the testing software is COM1, so that's always a nice thing to have. Another thing we want to look at here is this dip switch, which sets up the serial baud rates, and the manual tells you exactly how to do it. I've got it set at the default, which is 9600 baud, no parity, 1 stop bit. Clearly, if you were going to run 4 receivers, you probably want to crank the baud rate up to something like 38, 4 kb. But for the moment, for this test, we're all good at 9600. It'll prove the point. Lastly, we've got a power switch here. So, turn on our Polhemus. Well, let's get our computer and our test software started. Polhemus originally distributed its test software on a floppy, and if you're like most of us, you don't have a floppy anymore. So we put together a DOS bootable CD that contains all the Polhemus diagnostics, and I'll go ahead and start my computer up, put the CD in, and what we come up with is a little menu from our boot disk, and we're going to want item 6, Polhemus tracker. But before we do that, it's now time to power up the Polhemus system. As I mentioned, there's a power switch here. Turn that on, and then you'll notice on the front panel there's a green light, and it'll blink for about 10 seconds as the internal circuits go through a diagnostic, and then when it stays solid green, you know your system is up and running. Going back to the computer, let's choose item 6 just by using the down arrow key and then the enter key. and it'll do a little booting stuff, and it'll ask you to press enter to continue. And now you're in the Polhemus software itself, which has a number of different things. But let's start with the really basic one, which is let's request data, F7. And so if I do that, boom, I hit F7 once and it came up with the data for all 4 of my sensors. Okay, which would be sensor 1, 2, 3, 4, and these are X, Y, Z coordinates, angle, elevation, and roll for each of these nice little sensors here. And so we know we're up and running. I could switch to continuous mode by hitting F1, and now it'll continuously get our X, Y, and Z data for all 4 sensors and scroll it by on the screen. And so now you know that your tracker is basically working. I'll turn continuous off and we're all set to go. If for some reason you're using a different baud rate or a different I/O port, you can go to F6 setup, and that lets us adjust port number, parity, bits, so forth, and so on. Also lets you determine whether you want to use hardware flow control, which would take more than a 3-wire null modem, or you just want to use X on, X off flow control, which works fine on a 3-wire modem, and that's what I'm doing here. And when you're all done, you can hit File, Exit. It takes you back to the Polhemus program. So that's really how to test this puppy in a nutshell. Really simple, straightforward. Just remember to set all your dip switches right. Make sure you're on the right serial port. Make sure your cable is a good null modem, which is just a ground, receive, and data lines, where the receive and data lines are crossed between the 2 connectors. Other than that, it's a piece of cake. So, happy tracking.